Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Moreth. Today, we're here to talk a little bit about the upcoming matchup against Arkansas. Also, wanted to talk about the women's basketball game, the exhibition match against Christian Brothers. Blowout win there, 114-29. I won't talk too much about it. I talked with Zach before the podcast. Seems like Coach O didn't want too much tape on that game, preparing for a big game to start the year against number 3 ranked USC and Juju Watkins. That's going to be, a real test to start the year to see where this women's team's at for Coach O. Team 50, they looked good on night one in the exhibition game. A lot of offense, a lot more offense than you're maybe used to seeing from a Coach O team in the past. Really, these Coach O teams are just defensive dominant. Last year, though, Coach O had KK Deans go down early in the season, and it kind of just derailed that offense for a good while until they kind of picked up later in the year when they made that run into the playoffs, into the tournament. But it really just showed last year that Coach O really needed someone to be a primary ball handler on this team other than Kennedy Todd Williams and Maddie Scott. And she went out and got Tamia Sadler, who looked great playing point guard in game one. Didn't score a lot, but she shot the ball a lot. She got some shots up, shots that weren't bad shots. She just weren't falling for it. Similar to what Dre Davis kind of looked like in that game against Illinois the night before. So it seems like Tamia Sadler is probably going to be in that backup point guards, just kind of combo guard there with KK Deans in the backcourt. Another star in this game that I really wanted to just point out was Christina Walla in the paint. UCLA transfer, just kind of a presence down there. She had 9 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. That was in coordination. These are unofficial stats that I had from this game in coordination with the video board. Christina Walla just looked great down there in the paint, really just defending, rebounding, and just getting into the paint on offense. But really, out of everyone that was kind of new, she kind of was the most one that stood out, I guess I would have to say. Didn't see Star Jacobs. That was the only player for the women's team that did not play on that night. So we'll see her paired probably with Christina Walla in that front court at times this year. Carissa Richardson looked good. Probably see her a lot more once the season goes on up there in the paint as well. And then 2 other players I wanted to highlight as well were Mariah Noel. She had 15 points, and I talked to Zach about this. She had the ball on a string all night. It seemed like she was probably one of the best ball handlers out there. She's not really a point guard, really just kind of like an isolation player that kind of gets her own shots up and will score the basketball. Didn't have any crazy stat lines other than the 15 points. And then Sierra Chanot, a freshman, she looked really good, put up a lot of shots. Seemed like she was confident in those shots as well. Didn't get a lot of them to fall, only had 9 points, but looked great on the defensive end as well, had 2 steals. Like I said, not going to talk too much about that women's matchup for Coach O heading up to Paris on November 4th to take on number 3 USC and Juju Watkins. So I'll end it there, and we'll move into football. I guess the big thing this week for football for the Arkansas game right now is the injury report we just looked at, Zach. No real updates from yesterday. And the big news is Trey Harris is still questionable, and Jaquindon Jackson, Arkansas running back, is still out.
Yeah, Jackson's huge, Cam. He's an incredible player for Arkansas. He's their leading rusher. Despite their quarterback taking a lot of those carries, Jackson is the presence of their backfield. And it's kind of one less thing to worry about for Ole Miss. Arkansas is still going to have an effective game plan to rush with the ability of Taylen Green being able to use option plays, incorporating play action plays, ultimately opening up that run game for them. But it's a huge, huge help to this Ole Miss defense. I don't think he was going to be much of a problem because the defensive line, it's just so physical up there. But hey, I mean, anything helps. Hopefully he feels better, though. Obviously, we don't wish injury upon anyone here. Looking at that injury report, yeah, Trey Harris, he's going to be the story of the week, and we're not going to know anything until game day. It's very similar to last week. He's going to be questionable, and then a game time decision. I don't know. I've heard 2 things. I've heard Trey's playing. I've heard Trey isn't playing. So I don't know what to expect. I think if he does play, it's important for Ole Miss to really, stay into that offensive mode that they were in last week, right? Let's get Daquan Wright. Let's get Caden Prescourt involved in the offense. I'd like to see both of them combine for over 5 catches again. I think they did an awesome job exposing those Oklahoma linebackers. And I truly believe this Arkansas defense is on a lesser scale of Oklahoma. I think they're a little bit worse. They're obviously physical, a good SEC defense, but they're not great. and they're not coached like Oklahoma was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Juice Wells, Cam. I got one more thing.
Go ahead.
I've been waiting for this guy to break out all year long.
Yeah.
Man. Maybe this will be the game, but if Trey's not playing, if Trey is playing, I don't care. Let's see what Juice Wells can do, bro. All right.
Absolutely. I would like to see Juice Wells kind of just break out one of these games. Really, I mean, early in the season, he had to get 4 touchdowns through 3 games. Seemed like he was probably going to catch 10 touchdowns on the year. Haven't really seen much out of him since SEC play has begun. Obviously, had a pretty solid game against South Carolina. Probably could have had 2 scores in that game as well. But we obviously know the fumble in the end zone and some missed throws by Dart in that game as well. But it like going back to Trey Harris, like you said, it seems like every week we have someone on this Ole Miss injury report that we're talking about might play, might not play. And history tells us that these guys end up playing. Obviously, Trey Harris didn't play a week ago. But I think this is a step forward that you really haven't – last week when Trey Harris did not play, you heard all week that Trey Harris was probably not going to play, considering those Oklahoma, you're a 21-point favorite, even though you didn't look like a 21-point favorite out there. But it was a game that you were expected to win by a lot. It's a game that you expected you probably wouldn't need Trey Harris. And turns out it worked out for the Ole Miss offense anyway. But like I said, it seems like there's every week it has someone on this injury report that could play, could not play. And like you said, it's kind of up in the air with Trey Harris right now. It seemed like on Rep Talk earlier today, Lane Kiffin really didn't have an exact answer for the question that was given about Trey Harris. So we still probably won't know anything until game time when Trey Harris is out there at warm-ups. Obviously, last week he was not in pads, so we knew right away that he wasn't going to play. This week we'll have to wait to see the warm-ups in the Arkansas game. Going down the rest of the injury report, Matt Jones still questionable in there as well. Walter Nolan went down in that game last week, didn't play the second half. He is probable. That's good news for Ole Miss. Nate Kalepo, questionable for Ole Miss. That's not so much good news as we know that Ole Miss has kind of struggled up front a little bit as of recently. Micah Pettis did not play last week. He's probable this week. Jaden Williams probable. Jeremy James probable. And both tight ends are listed on here as probable for Ole Miss. I'm assuming those guys are going to play, probably just precautionary reasons throughout the week. Maybe those guys were in black jerseys, and Kiffin maybe thought that throw them on the list and see if you could throw Arkansas off a little bit. But I would like to see those tight ends, like Zach said, just be incorporated in this offense week-by-week basis. You're going to see a lot of tight end play out of Arkansas this week. Their tight ends are all over the field, especially Luke Hans.
Yeah, the dude's a menace. I think he leads them in touchdowns, Cam, but it's going to be another challenge. We saw Mason Taylor do great things for LSU against our secondary and our linebackers. And at the same time, I think there's another comparison to LSU. The leading receiver for Arkansas, Andrew Armstrong, is 6'4". Kyron Lacey was 6'2". And granted, Kyron Lacey is probably going to be a first-round pick. He's a much better version, if you will, of Andrew Armstrong. He's a more polished player. But they went out and they found those matchups for Kyron Lacey, whether it was against Jaden Kennedy or anyone not named Trey Amos. They got the man open. They got the man in space. And it's going to be crucial for Ole Miss to limit this from happening, because if you look across the board, and this isn't a shot, Ole Miss had all these players are super talented. They just happen to be short between Trey Washington, Lewis Moore, Jaden Kennedy. Trey Amos is really one of those only guys who's proven to be able to compete with these types of receivers. He has great size and length, and he's a really physical player. So I'm hoping he can do everything he can to limit Andrew Armstrong from breaking out in space, because he's a proven player. He's a senior. He's played a lot of football, and he's not a guy you want to get torched by. It's just not a good feeling, Cam. I'll tell you that. Also, Taylen Green, for those who don't know, this is the Arkansas quarterback. He's 6'6", 230 pounds. The dude is a unit. He's an absolute unit. I would fully expect them to use him almost as their running back since Jackson can't play. I think you're going to see him heavily involved in this offense, not only as a passer, but as a rusher, like I was saying earlier. And then another key point, Cam and I had talked about it before the podcast, but whether it was an injury or something, Arkansas has a new kicker, and he's been kicking since earlier in the month against Tennessee. I believe they played on October 5th. But this is a guy who he's been pretty consistent, but still, he doesn't have a lot of experience, and he has missed a 40-yarder. He did it the last time they were at home. So when Arkansas is on, those fourth downs in their territory of the field, I would expect them to go for it. I think due to Taylen Green's size and the confidence level they have in their kicker, which isn't as much as they would if, this was their guy the entire year, I think they're going to go for it. Ole Miss defense has not been great on fourth down. It's actually been the exact reason sometimes they lose the game. You look at Kentucky, the bomb down the field to Berrien Brown, and then Garrett Nussmeier extends plays on fourth down and basically saves the game for LSU. But the Ole Miss defense has to be ready to go and has to be ready to stop any sort of trickery or just an essential tush push from Taylen Green, who is a big dude.
Absolutely. Taylen Green is going to be just the key problem for Ole Miss this weekend. You've seen Jackson Arnold last week kind of cause some problems early in that game with his legs, especially with the read option plays, pulling the ball late and taking off to the outside. Ole Miss is going to have to limit that this week with Taylen Green. Obviously, you don't have to worry about Jaquindon Jackson. You'll get running back probably by committee for this Arkansas team. I believe Braylon Russell is the backup running back for Arkansas. He has half the carries Jackson has. I believe Jackson has over 100. Braylon Russell has around 50, 40 carries on the year. Not a lot of touchdowns. I believe only has 2 scores on the year. So they're really reliant on Jackson and Taylen Green in that run game. And I expect them to be really reliant on Green this weekend, probably north of 25 carries for Green this weekend. So we'll have to see what they do there. Moving into the keys and predictions of the game, I'll start off with the defensive keys for the game. Main highlight here is just keep and contain Taylen Green. You want to keep him in the pocket. We've seen Ole Miss do this in the past with Suntrine Perkins, get a spy out there and spy up. Will that be with Perkins this time? Probably not, with him being your leading sack leader. You probably put Perkins on the edge and you spy someone like Pooh Paul or TJ Daugherty on Taylen Green to keep him contained, keep him in the pocket. And then if you can get to him, if you can sack him, which even though he's the most pressured quarterback in the SEC, he's only been sacked about the same amount of times as Dart, so he gets away a lot. We know how quick Taylen Green can be once he gets out of the pocket. So Ole Miss is going to have to keep him in there, make him uncomfortable, and see what they can do once they keep him in the pocket. Because I believe he has 7 interceptions on the year, so he turns the ball over pretty often. Doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns. He likes to get out of the pocket a lot. So we'll have to see if Ole Miss can contain him in there. Another thing with Jackson being out, there's no excuse to shut down the run. Like Zach said earlier, you're probably shutting it down with Jackson there anyway. With Jackson being out, makes it a lot easier for this Ole Miss defense. I believe last week might have been the most rushing yards I'd seen Ole Miss give up all year against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma had a solid rushing plan to start the game, and it only had 22 rushing yards in the second half. If that Ole Miss team that came out in the second half, especially the defense, can start the game against Arkansas, I don't see much success on the ground outside of Taylen Green. And then limit the tight ends. I talked about this. Luke Haas is just one of the best players on the team. He's one of probably the best tight ends in the country, and he's going to be an NFL player one day. They also have 2 other tight ends that catch a lot of passes too. These guys for Arkansas, if you watch them, they're not typical tight ends that are going to just run your regular routes. They're most of the time going to run the tight end screens. They're going to run out to the flats, and they're just going to be really lethal in these short yardage situations. Zach mentioned that about Ole Miss being bad on fourth down, or was it third down, Zach?
Yeah, usually fourth, dude.
Usually fourth down. The Ole Miss defense pretty bad on fourth down. Look at Arkansas stat; they're not great on third down. So I would expect them to go for it on fourth down if they can get those fourth and short yardage situations. I would expect them to go for it, and I expect them to try to find someone like Luke Haas or another tight end in those short yardage situations that can get some pressure off Green from running the football. Because when it's 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, you're probably expecting a quarterback sneak from Green, but don't be surprised if you got Luke Haas in the flats and in the flats and he gets a first down on a 4th and short or a 3rd and short. Moving into the offense. Go ahead, Zach.
Nah, keep going, dude.
Yeah, moving into the offense for my keys, pretty short here. Harp on it every week. It seems like with the Ole Miss offense and what they can do better. Really just finish in the red zone. Get the ball to J.J. Pegues in the red zone, man. We saw it last week. Just his will to get into the end zone. Even when he was stopped in the backfield, he pushes forward and dives into the end zone, and it shows how bad a guy like JJ wants that. I know there's all the things about him breaking the records for being a big man scoring the ball, and that's great if he does that. But I think there's more to it than that. He wants to show his versatility, but also show that he's just willing to be anywhere and do whatever it takes to win games. And then continue the check down routes. talked about this a while ago on the podcast. You continue to check down routes to the tight ends, keep getting the ball out quickly. Obviously, this Arkansas defense is not going to be as fierce as that Oklahoma defensive line was, but you want to get the ball out quick. You want to keep Jackson comfortable and clean all night, especially on a road game that could get pretty rowdy in Arkansas.
Yeah, that's one of the keys for me, Cam, is taking the fans out of the game early. As much as the players and the coaches say that Death Valley didn't have an effect on them, I'm telling you right now, it did, man. Like, I'm listening to the game through my TV, and even I'm like, I don't know how they're snapping the ball. I don't know how they're hearing Jackson clap right now. I know it's an 11 a.m. kick, but still, Arkansas, pretty decent-sized stadium, kind of similar to South Carolina. So go do what you did to South Carolina in that day game and go take care of business. Offensively, you kind of have to throw for over 300 yards if you're Jackson Dart. And at the same time, I think it's going to be crucial for the running backs to rush for over 150 yards. That's what LSU did to Arkansas a few weeks ago, and they won 34-10. It was an absolute blowout in Fayetteville. But if you can get that rushing game established like Lane says they will on the road, then I think the offense opens up and Jackson's able to make some of these passes with or without Trey Harris. Similar to, like I said earlier, Andrew Armstrong, you have to limit him. He's Taylen Green's go-to guy. He's a big dude. And try and avoid the matchups when he's going against Jaden Kennedy and the smaller safeties and cornerbacks. I think it's going to be crucial. And then my last thing here, the Arkansas offensive line is averaging about 2 sacks a game, I believe that they're allowing. So go and get after Taylen Green, man. I know he can run. I know he can escape the pocket, but you have to apply some pressure. Make him throw the ball a little bit. Like Camp said, he's a guy who can throw a few interceptions here and there. So get in his face, put some pressure on him, and let's go make some plays, man. I think it's huge that Prince Umamielen is back in full force. He's by far the best pass rusher on this team, and I expect him to have an incredible game. I also expect Suntarian Perkins to stay on track. I got Perkins getting over 1.5 sacks, and I truly do believe he's going to have over 5 tackles as well.
Absolutely. I think the way Perkins is going, if he can finish the year strong, not that it really matters if you don't do what you thought you would do to start the season, but Perkins probably could lead the SEC in sacks if he can continue this really just streak he's been on of getting after the quarterback as of late. You mentioned Princely Umamielen. Great to see him back last week. It's really his presence out there. You can just tell that he's one of the best players on the field. And even in his time out, it seems like he's still rising up the draft stock. I believe just a couple of days ago, I saw that he was predicted to be the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft this next upcoming year. So I'm expecting Princely to probably be a top 10 projected pick once he goes and tears up the combine later this year, early in the year next year in 2025. And we'll have to see what he does after that. But similar to what Zach said, just kind of keeping Taylen Green in the pocket is going to be the key for Ole Miss this weekend. If you look back at that LSU game, LSU kind of dominated them all night in Fayetteville. And the key to that game for the LSU defense was Weeks, that middle linebacker that kind of caused some problems for Ole Miss in that game in Baton Rouge. Weeks was all over the field, really kind of just spying Taylen Green on the passing plays and keeping him in the pocket, getting after him. And then obviously that tipped ball that he intercepted himself, and that kind of shook Taylen Green up a little bit. It seems like if you can get to him and you can shake Taylen Green up enough where he's uncomfortable back there, he'll make some mistakes. He'll throw interception, maybe he fumbles here and there. And it seems like the Ole Miss defense is well more than capable of doing that. My prediction for the week, 33-27 Ole Miss. I believe the line was set at 7. Moved down to 6.5. I think it went back up to 7 today. I got Ole Miss defense getting 2+ turnovers in this game as well as that.
Cam, I'm going to set a very similar track as you with the same point differential of 6. I got Ole Miss winning 27-21. I really can't fathom Ole Miss losing this game. And I've said that earlier in the year. I mean, we lost to Kentucky. But, I mean, just in terms of talent and coaching and the fact that your season is literally over if you lose this game, there are a lot of things going on right now, and I truly believe it's going to propel Ole Miss to win this game. So, yeah, give me the Rebs, 27-21.
Absolutely. A lot to play for Ole Miss this weekend. A lot to play for Arkansas. They're 5-3. They're not really kind of tough to get into the playoffs in their position that they're in. But if they're playing for a lot, they're playing for a better bowl game. They're playing for a better standing in the SEC to help out with recruiting. But if you're this Ole Miss team, if you're the Ole Miss players, you're playing for a lot this weekend. And we know how, if you're an Ole Miss fan of the past, you know how these Arkansas games have gone in the past. Even of recent years, you know how these Arkansas games go. It can get kind of ugly late in the game. It can get kind of crazy, and especially if you're in Fayetteville. Good thing for Ole Miss, this one isn't at nighttime, but like Zach said earlier in the game, earlier in the podcast, this is a pretty big stadium that I expect Arkansas fans to show up for. And I believe that's all we got for football. Next up for Ole Miss this next upcoming week and throughout next week, men's basketball will take on Long Island in the SJB Pavilion at 7 p.m. on November 4th. The women's will be in Paris that day, taking on number 3 USC. At 11 a.m. So Coach O said in her press conference after that exhibition game, take your lunch break a little early, watch the reps play at 11 a.m. They'll be playing in Paris. And then when me and Zach come back to you guys next week, we'll be recapping this Arkansas game and then also talking about a very highly anticipated matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs next Saturday.
One game at a time, Cam. We got to win this one, and that's – We can't lose this game, dude. That's where I'm at right now.
Absolutely. I think Ole Miss will surprise some people this week, and hopefully we'll see what the offense can do, bouncing off. I mean, kind of building off of that end of that game last week. But that's all we got for you guys this week. Make sure to tune in that Arkansas game. It's 11 a.m. on ESPN this weekend on Saturday. Make sure to tune into that and stay tuned to therebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports.